"You going to have sex with me?" the towering black woman declared to the weathered rancher outside the dusty general store, her desperate words cutting through the afternoon heat like a blade. The frontier town sees only a dangerous anomaly, too tall, too bold, too black for their comfort. They whisper she'll be driven out by sundown or dragged back in chains by the men hunting her. But the lone rancher recognizes something else entirely, intelligence burning behind her desperation. His failing cattle operation needs a miracle, and her proposition might be the strangest salvation either has ever encountered. Yet accepting means risking everything he's built, while refusing condemns her to a fate worse than death. Neither realizes that powerful enemies circle both their futures like vultures, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Will the rancher's answer destroy them both, or forge an alliance that rewrites their destiny? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The dust kicked up around Cassandra's worn boots as she stepped into Willowbrook's main street. At 7 feet tall, she towered over every person in sight. Conversations stopped. Children pointed. Women pulled their skirts closer. The general store owner spotted her approaching his shop. He quickly flipped his sign to closed, despite the afternoon sun still hanging high. Through the window, she watched him shake his head at her pleading gesture. 3 more shops. 3 more rejections. Sheriff Taggart emerged from his office, hand resting on his belt. His cold eyes tracked her every movement. The message was clear without words. Move along. Cassandra had nowhere left to move. The seamstress shop remained open. Pearl Whitaker, silver-haired and bent with age, glanced up from her needlework. She studied Cassandra through the window but didn't turn away her sign. Inside, Pearl spoke quietly. Work was scarce. People were suspicious of strangers, especially ones who looked different. The old woman's eyes held sympathy but no solutions. Back on the street, Cassandra overheard the whispers. Freak. Runaway. Someone should do something about her. The words stung less than the hunger gnawing at her stomach. 3 days without a proper meal. 2 weeks since she'd escaped the men who claimed to own her. Her savings had run dry 50 miles back. The sun began its descent toward the horizon. Soon darkness would fall, and with it, her chances of finding shelter. The bounty hunters couldn't be far behind. That's when she saw him. Morgan Granger stood outside the general store, loading supplies into his wagon. His weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency. Gray streaked his brown hair. Deep lines marked his face like a map of hard years. She recognized him from earlier. Unlike the others, he hadn't stared or whispered. He'd simply nodded once and continued his business. Desperation made her bold. Cassandra approached his wagon. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was her last chance before nightfall brought new dangers. Morgan looked up from securing his supplies. His blue eyes studied her face, not her height. The words came out louder than intended, bold enough to stop every conversation on the street, clear enough that no one could pretend they hadn't heard. "You going to have sex with me?" Silence blanketed the entire street. Even the horses seemed to pause their shuffling. Morgan's eyes widened, not with anger or disgust, but surprise. He glanced around at the gathering crowd, then back at her face. "Ma'am, I think you might want to reconsider that approach." Heat flooded Cassandra's cheeks, but she pressed forward. Survival demanded honesty, not pride. "I need a husband. It's the only way I can get legal protection in this territory." The crowd murmured. Some laughed. Others looked scandalized. Sheriff Taggart pushed through the gathered people, his face dark with disapproval. Morgan raised a hand. The gesture somehow made the sheriff pause. "You're running from someone." It wasn't a question. Cassandra nodded. "And marriage would give you legal standing." Another nod. Morgan studied her face for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. Not pity, but recognition. As if he understood desperation from personal experience. "This is your solution?" "Only one I can think of." The sheriff stepped closer. His voice carried the weight of authority and threat. "Granger, You'd best move along. This woman needs to find somewhere else to conduct her business." Morgan's jaw tightened. He looked between Cassandra and the sheriff, then at the hostile faces surrounding them. What if I said I had a different proposition? Cassandra's breath caught. The crowd leaned in closer. "I've got a ranch that needs work, more than one man can handle alone. You help me run it, and I'll help you with your legal situation. Properly." The words hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Sheriff Taggart's face darkened further. Several townspeople began speaking at once. The general store owner emerged from his shop, suddenly interested in the conversation he'd avoided all day. Cassandra stared at Morgan. His offer sounded too good to be real. People didn't help strangers without expecting something in return, especially not strangers who looked like her. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." "Why?" Morgan glanced around at the hostile faces, then back at her. "Because I remember what it's like to need help and not get it." The crowd's murmur grew louder, disapproval mixed with shock. Someone mentioned the territorial laws about mixed marriages. Another voice questioned whether such a union would even be legal. Sheriff Taggart stepped between them. "Granger, think about what you're doing. This woman is trouble. I can guarantee it." Morgan's eyes never left Cassandra's face. "Seems to me the only trouble here is people not minding their own business." The sheriff's hand moved closer to his weapon. The gesture sent a clear message about how far he was willing to push the issue. Cassandra realized this moment would determine everything. Accept Morgan's offer and change both their lives forever. Refuse and face whatever darkness awaited her alone. The crowd waited. The sheriff waited. Morgan waited. Her next words would either save her or destroy them both. Yes, the single word changed everything. Morgan nodded once, then turned to address the crowd. "Anyone got a problem with legal marriage? Take it up with the territorial court." Sheriff Taggart's face flushed red. His hand remained near his weapon, but he made no move to draw it. "Too many witnesses. Too much attention. This won't end well, Granger. That's my concern, not yours." The crowd began to disperse, muttering among themselves. Some shook their heads in disgust. Others seemed curious about what would happen next. The general store owner retreated back inside his shop. Pearl Whitaker remained on her porch. She caught Cassandra's eye and nodded slightly. The gesture felt like a blessing. Morgan climbed into his wagon seat. "Get in. We'll handle the paperwork before sunset." Cassandra hesitated. Everything was moving so fast. This morning she'd been facing starvation and capture. Now she was agreeing to marry a complete stranger. But the alternative was worse. She climbed up beside him. The wagon springs creaked under her weight. Morgan didn't comment on her size or strength. He simply flicked the reins and guided the horses toward the other end of town. Justice of the peace. Harold Brennan lived in a small house behind the church. He answered their knock with suspicious eyes and a frown that deepened when he saw Cassandra. "What's this about?" "Marriage license. Legal ceremony. Today." Brennan looked between them like they'd asked him to perform magic tricks. "You sure about this, Morgan? This seems mighty sudden." "I'm sure." The old man's eyes lingered on Cassandra. She could practically hear his thoughts. Too tall. Too different. Too much trouble. There might be legal complications. Territorial laws are complex about these matters. Morgan's voice carried steel. "Are you refusing to perform a legal marriage between two consenting adults?" Brennan's face twitched. Refusing would mean explaining his reasons to territorial authorities. That conversation would be harder to have than simply conducting the ceremony. "I'll need witnesses." Pearl Whitaker appeared as if summoned. Behind her came Thomas Chen, who ran the town's small restaurant. Both nodded at Morgan with quiet respect. The ceremony lasted 10 minutes. Brennan read from his book in a monotone voice. He asked the required questions. Morgan and Cassandra gave the required responses. When it ended, Cassandra held a piece of paper that changed her legal status forever. Wife, property owner by marriage, protected under territorial law. The transformation felt surreal. They rode toward Morgan's ranch in silence. The town fell behind them, replaced by rolling hills and scattered cattle. The land stretched endlessly under the darkening sky. Morgan's ranch house sat in a valley between two low ridges. The structure looked solid but worn. Corrals needed repair. The barn door hung crooked on its hinges. "Place needs work," Morgan said, as if reading her thoughts. "Most places do." He showed her to a small room behind the kitchen. Clean bed, simple furniture, a window facing east toward the sunrise. "This work for you?" Cassandra nodded. She'd slept in far worse places. "We'll start early tomorrow. Cattle need moving to the north pasture. Fence repairs in the afternoon." "I can handle that." Morgan studied her face. "You've done ranch work before." "Different kind of work. Same principles." They ate a simple dinner of beans and cornbread. Morgan didn't ask about her past. She didn't volunteer information about his. The silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. After dinner, Morgan explained the ranch's situation. 50 head of cattle, limited water rights, creditors expecting payment by year's end. One man couldn't manage it all alone. "That's why you agreed to this." "Part of the reason." "What's the other part?" Morgan's eyes held something she couldn't quite identify. Loss, maybe. Or understanding that came from hard experience. Everyone deserves a chance to start over. That night, Cassandra lay in her new bed staring at the ceiling. For the first time in months, she felt safe. No bounty hunters. No sleeping in barns or under bridges. No wondering where her next meal would come from. But safety came with complications. The next morning proved her right. Sheriff Taggart arrived before breakfast. His horse kicked up dust in the yard as he dismounted. His face carried the same hostility from town, plus something new: determination. Morgan met him on the porch. Cassandra watched from the kitchen window. "Come to congratulate the happy couple?" Taggart's laugh held no humor. "Come to inform you that certain people have questions about yesterday's ceremony." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that might require legal review. Territorial courts take a dim view of fraudulent marriages." "Nothing fraudulent about it." "That remains to be seen." Taggart's eyes found Cassandra through the window. His stare felt like a physical threat. "Funny how convenient this all worked out. Woman shows up desperate. You suddenly need a wife. Makes a person wonder about motives." Morgan stepped closer to the sheriff. The movement was subtle but unmistakably protective. "My motives are my business. Not if they involve breaking territorial law." The two men faced each other in the morning sun. Neither backed down. Neither spoke. Finally, Taggart remounted his horse. "I'll be keeping an eye on this situation. Real close eye." He rode away, leaving dust and implied threats behind. Morgan turned toward the house. His expression had hardened into something Cassandra hadn't seen before. Resolve mixed with anger. "Looks like we've got more trouble than expected." "You regretting this already?" Morgan's eyes met hers through the window. "Not even close." 2 weeks into their partnership, Morgan discovered he'd underestimated everything about his wife. Cassandra moved a dozen cattle single-handedly while he struggled with 6. Her massive frame allowed her to guide the animals with gentle but irresistible pressure. What took him an hour, she completed in 30 minutes, but her physical strength was only the beginning. "Your fence line runs another 100 yards past that ridge," she said, studying his property deed over breakfast. Morgan looked up from his coffee. "That can't be right. Survey markers are still there. Territorial office recorded it wrong on their map." She pointed to the legal description, her finger tracing the boundary lines. The woman could read better than most men in town. Her handwriting, when she updated the cattle count ledger, was precise and clear. "Where did you learn all this?" "Had to manage field rotations back east. Crop yields, animal inventories. Same principles apply." Morgan studied her face. Every day revealed new depths. This wasn't luck. This was education and experience wrapped in a desperate situation. Their morning routine developed naturally. Cassandra handled the livestock while Morgan repaired equipment. Afternoons, they worked together on larger projects. Evenings, she calculated their progress while he planned the next day's tasks. The ranch began responding to their combined efforts. Cattle looked healthier with proper pasture rotation. Fences stayed intact with Cassandra's reinforcement techniques. Water conservation improved under her systematic approach, but success brought attention they didn't want. Pearl Whitaker visited on a Thursday morning. The old seamstress arrived with fresh bread and information. "Town's talking," she said, settling into a kitchen chair. "When isn't it?" Morgan replied. "Different kind of talk now. Some folks are impressed with what you two are accomplishing." Pearl's eyes found Cassandra, who was reviewing supply lists at the table. "Others are asking questions about how things change so fast around here." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that wonder if this marriage is more convenient than romantic." Cassandra looked up from her papers. "Is that a problem?" "Could be. Territorial law requires marriages to be genuine. Fraud can void the whole arrangement." The implications hung heavy in the kitchen air. If their marriage was declared invalid, Cassandra would lose her legal protection. The bounty hunters would have clear authority to take her. "Anyone can challenge it?" Sheriff's been asking around, talking to people about signs of authentic matrimony. Morgan's jaw tightened. "Taggart's fishing for ammunition. He's found some folks willing to provide it. Store owners who remember the original proposition, people who think the whole thing happened too fast." Pearl's warning proved accurate sooner than expected. Friday afternoon brought 3 riders to the ranch, hard men with official-looking papers and confident attitudes. Their leader, a thin man with pale eyes, dismounted and approached the porch. "Name's Fletcher. We're here about the woman." Morgan stepped outside. Cassandra remained in the doorway, close enough to hear, but positioned to run if necessary. "What about her?" "She's wanted back east. Breach of contract. Theft of property." "What property?" Fletcher's smile held no warmth. "Herself. Her previous employer has legal claim to her services. Slavery's been abolished. Debt slavery hasn't. She owes money. Signed papers agreeing to work until the debt was satisfied." Fletcher produced a document from his coat. The paper looked official enough, complete with stamps and signatures. "This says she left before fulfilling her obligations. That makes her a thief." Morgan studied the paperwork. The legal language was complex, but the intent was clear. Someone back east claimed ownership of Cassandra through debt manipulation. Even if this was legitimate, she's married now. That changes her legal status. Does it? We hear that marriage might not be as genuine as it appears. Fletcher's eyes moved to Cassandra. Convenient timing, desperate woman, sympathetic rancher. Makes a person wonder about authenticity. The threat was clear. Challenge the marriage's legitimacy, and Cassandra would lose her protection. Without legal standing, she'd be vulnerable to any claim against her. "You have 3 days to consider your options," Fletcher continued. "Return with us voluntarily, or we'll involve territorial authorities. And if we refuse, then we'll see how well your marriage stands up to official scrutiny." The men remounted and rode away, leaving dust and ultimatum behind. That evening, Morgan found Cassandra in the barn, aggressively mucking stalls. Her movements carried fury and frustration in equal measure. "They can't take you back." "They can if our marriage gets declared fraudulent." She threw another shovelful of hay with unnecessary force. 3 days. That's all we have before they return with legal papers. Morgan leaned against the stall door. His mind raced through possible solutions. None seemed adequate. There might be another way. Cassandra stopped working. "What kind of way?" Pearl mentioned something about territorial homestead laws. Married couples who successfully operate ranches get additional protections. "We've been married 2 weeks. Hardly counts as successfully operating anything. Unless we can prove exceptional circumstances." Morgan's idea began taking shape as he spoke. "Ranch has improved dramatically since our marriage. Cattle are healthier. Productivity is up. We're ahead of schedule on all major projects. That proves we work well together. Not that our marriage is genuine. Maybe that's enough." Cassandra studied his face in the barn's dim light. "You're willing to risk everything on maybe?" "I'm willing to risk everything to keep you safe." The words hung between them, carrying weight neither had acknowledged before. Why? You barely know me. Morgan was quiet for a long moment. Because everyone deserves a chance to choose their own life, and because what we've built here is worth protecting. Even if it costs you the ranch, even then. Outside, the sun set over their valley. 3 days felt like nothing against the magnitude of what they were facing. The answer came from an unexpected source. While organizing Morgan's late father's papers, Cassandra discovered a deed buried beneath years of ranch receipts. The document was older than the others. Written in faded ink on yellowed paper, her hands trembled as she read the legal description. The original homestead grant extended far beyond the current ranch boundaries. According to the territorial survey, Morgan's land included the entire valley plus mineral rights to the ridge system running north. Mineral rights that were worth a fortune. She studied the newer property records Morgan had been using. Someone had altered the boundary descriptions. The changes were subtle but deliberate. Hundreds of acres had been quietly removed from his legal claim. Cassandra spread the documents across the kitchen table. The pattern became clear when viewed together. Over the past 5 years, Morgan's official property size had shrunk while his tax burden remained the same. He was paying taxes on land he supposedly didn't own. When Morgan returned from checking the cattle, Cassandra showed him the discovery. "This can't be right," he said, studying the original deed. "Survey markers are still out there. I checked the ridgeline yesterday. Your father's boundary stones match this document, not the county records." Morgan compared the papers side by side. The discrepancies were undeniable. "Someone's been stealing my land on paper. More than that, they've been positioning to take the rest." Cassandra pointed to the mineral rights clause. "This ridge system runs through 3 counties. If there's gold or silver up there, these rights are worth more than 100 ranches." The implications hit Morgan like a physical blow. His struggles to maintain the ranch, the constant pressure from creditors, the town's sudden interest in his marriage. "They want me to fail, so they can claim the land for unpaid taxes. Sheriff Taggart's been pushing the marriage investigation awfully hard for someone who should be neutral. You think he's involved? I think someone's been planning this for a long time. Our marriage just complicated their timeline." That evening, Pearl Whitaker arrived with urgent news. "Taggart's meeting with strangers at the hotel. Well-dressed men from out of town. They've been asking questions about your ranch's financial situation." The old woman's eyes held worry. "Word is they're planning to challenge your property claim along with the marriage." "On what grounds?" "Failure to maintain territorial residency requirements. They're saying you abandoned the ranch when you spent time in town for supplies." Morgan's anger flared. "That's ridiculous. Doesn't matter if it's true. Matters if they can make it stick long enough to force a sale." Cassandra studied the timeline. Fletcher's ultimatum, the property investigation, the marriage challenges. They're coordinating all of this. Force us to choose between fighting the bounty hunters or defending the ranch claim. While we're distracted, they push through the land seizure. Pearl nodded grimly. "Gets worse. Those well-dressed men, they've been surveying your ridge line, brought equipment and everything." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Someone had discovered the mineral potential of Morgan's land. Rather than buy it legally, they'd chosen to steal it through bureaucratic manipulation. The marriage investigation wasn't about law enforcement. It was about eliminating obstacles. "How long do we have?" "County assessors coming tomorrow to reevaluate your property for tax purposes. If they find discrepancies between your claim and their records, they can freeze everything pending investigation." "Which gives them time to file competing claims." "Exactly." That night, Morgan and Cassandra developed their strategy. "We fight on multiple fronts," she said, spreading maps across the table. "Challenge their property records with the original deed. Demand a proper survey using your father's boundary markers. Force them to prove their alterations are legitimate. What about Fletcher and his men? We make them part of the solution instead of the problem." Morgan looked skeptical. "How?" by proving our marriage is not only genuine but essential to successful ranch operation. Make our partnership too valuable for the territory to dissolve. Cassandra's plan was ambitious. Document every improvement they'd made since the wedding. Calculate the ranch's increased productivity. Demonstrate that their combined skills created something neither could achieve alone. We turn their timeline against them. Force them to choose between seizing successful property or failed property. And if they choose to seize it anyway? Then we make sure everyone knows what they're really after. The next morning brought unexpected allies. Thomas Chen arrived with fresh supplies and information. The restaurant owner had been listening to conversations at the hotel. Those men from back east? They're not just bounty hunters. They're advanced scouts for a mining company. How do you know? Left papers in their room. Geological surveys of this entire region. Thomas produced a hand-drawn copy of a map. The ridge system was marked with potential excavation sites. Morgan's ranch sat directly in the center of the proposed operation. They need clear title to the land before they can start mining. That's why they're working so hard to remove both of you. Pearl arrived an hour later with the county assessor in tow. Figured you'd want witnesses for this meeting. The assessor, a nervous man named Hutchins, carried official documents and an uncomfortable expression. I'm here to resolve discrepancies in your property records. Morgan spread the original deed on the table. Happy to resolve them. Let's start with why my land boundaries keep shrinking while my taxes stay the same. Hutchins studied the documents. His face went pale as he compared the original survey to his current records. These show significant differences. They show deliberate alterations. I'll need to investigate this immediately. You do that. While you're investigating, we'll be documenting every change made to these records over the past 5 years. Hutchins left quickly, promising a full review. The battle lines were drawn. Morgan and Cassandra against forces trying to steal everything they'd built. The stakes couldn't be higher. Lose, and they'd lose everything. Win, and they'd expose corruption reaching deep into the territorial government. Either way, there was no going back. Fletcher returned with reinforcements. 6 riders approached the ranch at dawn. All carried official-looking papers. All wore the confident expressions of men who expected victory. Morgan met them in the yard. Cassandra stood beside him, no longer hiding in doorways. Time's up, Fletcher announced. We're here to collect what's owed. Funny timing. County assessor just confirmed our property boundaries yesterday. Fletcher's smile wavered slightly. Property disputes don't concern us. We're here about debt collection. What debt? Fletcher produced his papers again. The same documents from before, but now accompanied by additional paperwork. Breach of contract, theft of services, and now harboring a fugitive. She's my wife. Fraudulent marriage doesn't provide legal protection. Sheriff Taggart emerged from behind the riders. His presence made the threat official. Counties received complaints about the legitimacy of your union. I'm here to investigate. Investigate away. Taggart dismounted and approached the porch. His eyes scanned the property with obvious interest. Looks like you've made significant improvements recently. Hard work tends to do that. Hard work or something else? The sheriff's implication hung in the morning air. You suggesting we've done something illegal? I'm suggesting successful ranches require significant capital investment. Makes a person wonder where that money came from. Cassandra stepped forward. It came from proper management and efficient labor allocation. Taggart's eyes narrowed. Fancy words for a woman in your position. What position is that? Fugitive, hiding behind a fake marriage. The confrontation escalated when Pearl Whitaker arrived with unexpected company. 3 men in territorial government uniforms rode behind her wagon. The lead officer dismounted and approached Taggart. Sheriff, we need to discuss irregularities in local property records. Taggart's face went pale. What irregularities? Systematic alteration of deed boundaries, tax collection on disputed property, possible conspiracy to defraud legitimate landowners. The territorial officer produced his own paperwork. Official seals and signatures marked every page. We've been investigating complaints about improper land transfers in this county. Fletcher shifted nervously. This doesn't concern our business here. Actually, it does. The officer's attention turned to Fletcher's group. Your mining company filed preliminary claims on this property last month, before resolving the ownership dispute. We were assured the land would be available. By whom? Fletcher's eyes flicked toward Taggart. Local authorities indicated the current owners would be removed. The admission hung like smoke over the assembled group. Morgan stepped forward. Removed for what reason? Failure to maintain legal residency, invalid marriage, financial default, all of which would clear the property for new claims. The territorial officer studied the documents Fletcher carried. These debt collection papers, they're signed by a company that dissolved 6 months ago. Fletcher's confident expression cracked. That's impossible. Territorial records don't lie. Your supposed creditor doesn't exist. Pearl Whitaker climbed down from her wagon with a satisfied smile. Took some digging, but the truth has a way of surfacing. The old seamstress had been busy. Her investigations revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. Mining company needed clear title to this valley. Sheriff provided information about vulnerable properties. Fake creditors created false debt claims. Everything coordinated to steal land for mineral rights. Taggart backed toward his horse. I don't know what you're talking about. Bank records say otherwise. 3 payments from Eastern Mining Associates to your personal account. The territorial officer signaled his men. Sheriff Taggart, you're under arrest for conspiracy to defraud territorial landowners. You can't prove anything. We can prove enough. As Taggart was led away, Fletcher's group found themselves surrounded by territorial authorities. Their fake papers and invalid claims collapsed under official scrutiny. You're free to leave, the officer told Fletcher, but stay out of this territory. The would-be bounty hunters departed quickly, their confidence replaced by fear of prosecution. Morgan and Cassandra stood in their yard, watching the dust settle. The territorial officer approached them. Your property rights are confirmed. The original deed stands as filed. Anyone who says otherwise will answer to territorial court. And our marriage? Valid under all territorial laws. Anyone who claims otherwise can file formal challenges through proper legal channels. Pearl Whitaker gathered her things from the wagon. Might want to record your deed properly with the new county clerk. The old one seems to have developed memory problems. As the official party departed, Morgan and Cassandra found themselves alone again. The morning's events felt surreal. Hours earlier, they'd faced losing everything. Now their enemies were in custody, and their rights were confirmed. Think it's really over? This part is. There'll be other challenges. Cassandra looked across their valley. The land that had nearly been stolen stretched endlessly under the morning sun. Different kind of challenges. The kind we can handle together. Morgan's words carried new meaning. Their marriage had begun as convenience. It had evolved into partnership. Now it felt like something deeper. Together sounds good. That afternoon they rode to town to file the corrected property records. Thomas Chen provided lunch. Pearl Whitaker offered congratulations. Even the general store owner seemed friendlier. Success had changed how people viewed them. But more importantly, it had changed how they viewed themselves. The ranch that had been failing under Morgan's solitary management now thrived under their combined efforts. The woman who had arrived desperate and hunted now stood as a respected landowner. Their partnership had become the foundation for something neither had expected. A future built on mutual respect, shared goals, and the quiet satisfaction of work done well together. The valley that had nearly been stolen was now truly home. 1 year later, the valley hummed with activity that would have seemed impossible during those desperate early days. Cassandra stood on the expanded porch, reviewing applications from prospective ranch hands. Word had spread throughout the territory about the innovative management techniques being developed at the Granger Ranch. Young men traveled from 3 counties seeking apprenticeships. The operation had grown beyond anyone's expectations. 80 head of cattle now grazed the properly surveyed pastures. The mineral rights Morgan's father had secured decades earlier generated steady income through careful leasing agreements. But the real success came from the systematic approach Cassandra had developed for sustainable ranching. Crop rotation that maintained soil health, water conservation that survived drought seasons, animal husbandry that maximized productivity while ensuring livestock welfare. Other ranchers arrived weekly seeking advice. Morgan emerged from the barn, leading a group of visitors through their morning tour. 3 established cattlemen from the Eastern Territory had come to observe their methods firsthand. The key is integration, he explained, gesturing toward the carefully planned pasture system. Every element supports every other element. The visitors took notes as Cassandra demonstrated the record-keeping system that tracked everything from individual animal health to seasonal productivity patterns. Most operations lose money because they don't measure what matters, she said, opening ledgers that detailed their year-over-year improvements. 20% increase in calf survival rates, 30% reduction in feed costs, 40% improvement in land utilization efficiency. The numbers told the story better than words. After the visitors departed, Morgan and Cassandra settled into their evening routine. Planning the next day's activities had become a shared ritual. "County Commissioner wants to discuss the apprenticeship program," Morgan said, reviewing their correspondence. "How many applications this month?" 16, from as far away as Colorado Territory. Cassandra studied the latest batch of letters. Young men seeking opportunity, established ranchers wanting to learn new techniques, even a few women inquiring about possibilities. "We'll need to expand the bunkhouse again. Already talked to Chen about materials. He can have lumber delivered next week." Their partnership had evolved into something far more complex than either had imagined. Business decisions flowed naturally between them. Financial planning reflected shared priorities. Long-term goals emerged from combined vision. The marriage that had begun as desperate convenience now formed the foundation of a thriving enterprise. More importantly, it had become a source of genuine contentment. Pearl Whitaker visited on Sunday afternoons, always carrying news and observations about their transformation. "Town council's talking about nominating you for territorial business recognition," she mentioned over tea. "For what?" "Innovation in agricultural development, economic impact on regional growth, model partnership practices." Pearl's eyes twinkled with satisfaction. Funny how attitudes change when success becomes undeniable. The old seamstress was right. The same townspeople who had once whispered disapproval now spoke with pride about their local success story. The general store owner had apologized for his initial hostility. Sheriff Taggart's replacement made regular friendly visits. Even the territorial government had sent representatives to study their methods. Success bred acceptance where tolerance had failed. But the most significant changes were personal. Morgan had emerged from the isolation that grief had imposed after his family's death. Working alongside Cassandra had restored his sense of purpose and connection to the community. Cassandra had discovered possibilities she'd never imagined during her years of bondage and struggle. Legal protection had evolved into genuine empowerment. Survival had transformed into achievement. Their evening conversations covered topics ranging from livestock genetics to territorial politics to philosophical questions about progress and tradition. "Think we've built something lasting here?" Morgan's question came during one of their planning sessions. "Depends on what you mean by lasting." Cassandra gestured toward the ledgers documenting their success. "The business model works. Other people are adopting our techniques. That suggests longevity." "I meant something more personal." She understood his meaning. Their relationship had grown beyond business partnership into something deeper but harder to define. "I think we've built something worth maintaining, even if circumstances change, especially if circumstances change." The conversation reflected a truth they'd both recognized, but rarely discussed directly. What had begun as mutual necessity had evolved into mutual choice. They remained married because they wanted to be, not because they had to be. Winter brought time for planning the following year's expansion. Requests for consultation continued arriving from throughout the region. The Territorial Agricultural Commission had invited them to present their methods at the annual Ranchers' Conference. Recognition that would have seemed impossible during those early, desperate days. "Remember what you said that first day in town?" Cassandra's question came during a quiet evening by the fire. "Which part?" "About everyone deserving a chance to start over." Morgan smiled. "Still believe it. Think we've earned our fresh start?" "I think we've built something better than a fresh start." Outside their window, the valley stretched endlessly under starlight. The land that had nearly been stolen through conspiracy and corruption now supported a thriving operation that benefited the entire region. The ranch employed 8 full-time workers. The apprenticeship program had trained dozens of young men who carried improved techniques to their own operations. The innovative practices developed here were being adopted throughout 3 territories. But beyond the measurable success lay something more valuable. 2 people who had found each other during desperate circumstances had chosen to build a life together based on mutual respect, shared goals, and the quiet satisfaction of meaningful work. The marriage that had shocked a town with its bold beginning had evolved into a partnership that inspired others with its steady success. They had created not just a thriving business, but a model for how different people could achieve extraordinary things together. The future stretched before them like the valley itself, full of possibility and promise built on the solid foundation of trust, hard work, and chosen commitment to each other's success.